I mean, I won't keep you too long. I can only imagine you have a few things to be doing. First of all, it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Um, Me being just a massive gamer head, Dignitas, the whole thing is huge, super cool.
Mhm.
And then obviously yourself, your own background, two-time IEM champion. It's also
Yeah.
pretty cool. So I mean, I'll start off with that. Your background within esports, and obviously the whole thing that happened from Blizzard's side when they cut everything off out of nowhere, and how then you ended up being the director of esports for the team that you played for your whole
Mhm.
pretty much your whole career. So I'll start off with that. That'll be a good question, I think, to
Yeah,
start off with.
yeah, for sure. Oh, do you want to go now?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Oh,
whenever you're
okay.
ready.
Yeah, yeah, okay, ready,
Sorry.
ready. Alright, so, yeah, I mean, obviously, getting to be a pro player and having the opportunity is something that I always dreamed of growing up.
Yeah.
I watched a bunch of StarCraft, watched a bunch of League of Legends, and then getting to do that myself was, it's like a dream come true. Um, when I was a pro player, I always knew there was something special about esports, and I always knew that's where I wanted to be and wanted to really spend my time and wanted to work in the future. Um, so I did spend a lot of my time when I was a pro player looking for opportunities to stay in the scene, making connections, learning as much as I could from the insanely smart and talented people around me at events and inside my organization. And when I came to the point where I decided it was time to retire and to move on from my playing career, I had lots of options. I had some casting offers, I had some coaching offers, I had some more playing offers, I had some kind of operational things around the industry. And what really stood out to me was coming to Dignitas was a place I'd been a long time, obviously.
Yeah.
As a player, I kind of told them what I wanted to do. I told them, long term, I want to be a really key player in the space. I want to have ownership over what I do. I want to be a leader. Um, and I want to live in America. And they put in front of me a plan, which was basically, we want to help you achieve those goals too, within the org. And so I was very excited to accept it first, quite a junior position, working mainly on social media. And then over the past couple of years, I've worked my way through social to marketing to biz dev to partnerships, and then back around teams, and then kind of leading the operation now, which is a great honor.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that sounds like everyone's dream. I mean, even me thinking about it, like obviously it's a very hard space to get into, 100%. And if you're lucky enough and you have the talent where you can play on a team and you can make those connections, that's something that's also pretty cool. And I can only imagine you would say to most players or all players who are in that position, because it's the same as any sport. Your career doesn't last forever, so having that goal or that backup plan in a sense that you did is obviously something very great to have, and definitely an amazing opportunity, especially with Dignitas, as I said. Huge.
Absolutely. I mean, so there's many ways to do it, and you see a lot of people. One of the best ways to do it is really build up a brand for yourself, and that opens up so many opportunities in terms of being a creator inside that space. Immediately after, into transitioning that to something else. Like we've seen a lot of successful pro players have become streamers and then transitioned that into another scene.
Yeah.
Like Shroud is a great example where he was a CS:GO player for the longest time, and then became a PUBG player and became the biggest person on Twitch for quite a while, right? So making a brand for yourself, streaming, having social media presence, that stuff is always extremely important to your future prospects.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's even some of the guys that are like back into like even the NLC or Prime Division 1 in Germany, like they're still pretty big scenes, and for the region, like the respective region, it's really big. Like even in Germany, like I live in Bremen at the moment, and even Division 2, Division 1 players that are in those scenes, me personally, when I watch some of them, I feel like they can also do something similar where they can build their own brand from even being in those kind of lower divisions. It's still something that's possible for them to do. You don't just have to be, you know, a very successful LCS player to do it, or even Shroud or something like that. Is from what I see.
Absolutely. And to be honest, speaking more from the team side right now, like we're always looking for ways to engage our fans. It's one of the great priorities in esports is how do you get more fans? How do you engage them? How do you really do more for them? In the real sports, it's much easier when you just have them in person and you can have them
Yeah.
see the athletes in real life. And so even growing a brand, starting out from the more developmental and the smaller leagues is still a massive boost, even for your future as a player.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I suppose talking now about like LCS and stuff like that, you guys kind of your goals for this LCS season, um, your outlook on the season upcoming roster, and then I suppose the other thing would be like competing against the annual world teams. So like your Cloud Nines, your TSMs, even your newer teams like 100 Thieves, who they played at Worlds for the first time this year, pretty decent. They had a really good time, and then what would your outlook be this season and how you guys feel like it's going to go for yourselves?
So what we're doing this year is a continuation of what we started the previous year. And I think it's very important to acknowledge very upfront. Um, Without spending a lot of money, it is basically impossible for a team to go um, from starting anywhere to being a team that can compete with the perennial awards teams, the Cloud Nines, the TSMs. And so when you start in that position, you have to come up with a plan as to what do you want to do then? Do you want to push for that word slot? In which case, if you're 100 Thieves, for example, where you say, no matter the cost, we have to get there, then you scout for opportunities like pick up the Golden Guardians roster, which had a lot of potential, right? And then you augment that over the course of the year. So they immediately added a massive upgrade in top lane with Someday. Throughout the year, it's clear they're trending towards fourth, fifth, and they say, okay, we need to get another upgrade. So they bought on Reaper, one of the best, most accomplished coaches of all time. And then, extra assurance, they bought on Abadage, who is a fantastic mid laner from Europe, right? And like now you have a really strong team. And that's the kind of investment that can catapult you there fast. With the Dignitas angle, our plan is a bit more long term, because we very much don't want to be a team that's around for 2 years, has two good splits, and then disappears again, right? Like we are trying to build a long-term foundation for success here. And so the goal for this previous year was to invest quite heavily in developmental talent, to pair them with a strong identity and culture on the team, which came from our leaders, Afu and Dardock, and to use that to train them and to create high quality LCS talent that has the potential to compete with the very best. And I am extremely confident in both Fate God and Neo, who I think have proven that they can do that, and they can go much further than they did last year as well. So we're extremely excited about those, and I think that was a massive success on our part. The kind of year two of that plan involves you have to get more people like that in, and you have to also try and match the point where they are in their careers. And so what we're looking to do again is we're looking to bring in two very strong jungle and support. We're keeping it fairly consistent where we have River and Biofrost, who I think are two players that I mean, I think River's insane.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, I think there's a good chance that River might be the best jungler in the OCS. I think it was a really good job scouting by our coaching staff, and I'm just really excited to see what he can do. And I think Biofrost is someone that is going to slot into exactly what we need from our support role really well. The last play he played, he was an LCS champion. And I think we saw how different TSM looked with Biofrost to compare to how they looked without Biofrost.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting to see a similar boost for our team as well. So super excited about those two pieces. Super excited about the status of Fate Guard and Neo, who will continue to develop. And then the most important thing for us was really nailing down a good support staff around it. And that was probably our major focus for this year. Last year, we were quite minimal. And this year, we brought in a really strong developmental coach from Europe, Enetran, who, in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest developmental coaches we've seen in the West. I've just looked at his history with players like Armut, Closer. hear it, you can see he has developed people who didn't have that much hype around them into some of the top prospects in their leagues right now. And so I have full faith that he can do that at Dignitas as well, especially with the pieces that we're giving him.
Yeah.
And also bringing in Lenny Wisma as our new director of performance. I think Lenny is a guy with a history that speaks entirely for itself, and I'm excited for the fans to get to know him more.
Yeah.
And finally, Jim Marson coming in and transitioning from that analyst role into being the senior manager, and being able to have more impact on the structure and the day-to-day of the team. I think we've built a really strong support staff. I think we've built a really strong roster, and I'm really excited to see how they do in the OCS.
Yeah. No, I mean, it all sounds it sounds like you guys have a plan on what you want, and it sounds great because, as I said at the start, Dignitas is an org that has been in League of Legends since the beginning, since the very start. So it's really good to see that it's kind of focusing more on, like you said, the younger talent, the newer talent, the fresh talent, and not just trying to put every single penny into it and try and get to Worlds and see what happens. So it's
Yeah.
really good to hear it. It's really nice. I suppose that can lead straight into my next question, which is your whole the scouting process. And without giving away too many secrets on what you guys do, do you focus purely on players who have been in that pro level LCS, LEC, whether that be across seas in different regions, or do you also look towards players who haven't been at that level, like you have your Division 2s, you have your Division 1s, you have your Prime Leagues, NLC? Is that sometimes on the radar, or is it normally just the players who have that pro level, have that experience?
So the first thing we do is that we first look internally. We look at our own region, and it's easiest. It's the best place to start, right?
Yeah.
And we quickly find out who do we think is valuable from this region, and you note them down. You go to the minor regions next, which is the process that usually happens over the World Championship, especially the teams that do make it to the Worlds and the playing stage. And you really look, are there any hidden gems that we can find here? And then finally, towards the playoff stages and group stages of the world, you look at the major regions. So you look at Europe, China, and Korea. At least that's how Dignitas does it. So in terms of the actual mechanisms we use to scout, the eye test is very important. And we use that to very much develop a bit of an indication of our players. We then take a broad spectrum of stats, and we put the stats into a massive sorting algorithm, and it turns up any people who are statistically strong performers. And so together with that, we build what's called a long list. From that long list, we will quickly discount people that don't fit what we're looking for. So people who we know do not pair well in game with our other players that we have, right? Players that perhaps are too expensive, players that don't have the experience to fit the role we need. For example, in support, we know we need someone quite experienced, right? As promising as rookie supports might be, it's not a good idea to have them in our CS team. So with that, we come up with a medium list. And with that medium list, we go through a process where we essentially put eye test evaluations of their skill in various aspects. So one of them being mechanics, game sense, and various other categories that I won't go into too much. And we try to really evaluate them against each other. We then have a formula that combines those ratings with the statistical ratings, and it spits out a score for each player. And that score is something that we use to really help define our shortlist. All of our players that we had this year were extremely were kind of surprising outliers, where the public perception was very far removed from the score that we were getting out and the way that we were feeling about those players. And so I think, to be transparent, I know that there has been certain hesitancy towards the roster decisions, shall we say. And I think it can be very much be explained by that targeting players who we thought were undervalued by the community was actually one of the, I don't want to say goals, but one of the things that we really thought about this offseason is that's a place where we're going to find people who deserve teams, who deserve to compete, and who can compete in the LCS, who might not be getting looks from other places. And so I think that might be an explanation for some of our roster decisions, and I I am very confident in the ability of our roster to perform this year.
Yeah, definitely. No, it sounds good. I mean, it sounds like I'm trying to think of the name of the movie with Brad Pitt about the baseball league where they did the whole statistic sheet.
Oh, Moneyball.
Yes, Moneyball. It sounds very similar to that. It sounds really good, but it's also good to hear that there's that pool of players, like you said, who is able to compete and wants to compete. But some people are overlooking them because they feel like, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, like football itself. Money doesn't always buy you the best player. It's going to be the same with League of Legends. So there is definitely going to be players out there who are very good in their role, and they are worth a look. So it's good to hear that, definitely. Um, I mean, there's another question that I wanted to ask as well, is comparing the LEC and the LCS. It might be difficult to do, or maybe it's easier to do than I think. But from a player standpoint, and also from an org standpoint, comparing the two and how they kind of function, is it very similar? Is it two very different worlds? Because I know I was reading about it a lot when there was the whole thing of some of the teams in the LCS, they wanted to kind of get rid of the whole 3 region player where you had to be from that region. And I was reading a lot about that. I wasn't really agreeing with it, but you might be able to give a better insight on it than I can.
Yeah, so the first thing to note is that I haven't worked in LEC.
Okay.
So I don't really understand it on a deep level.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say there's a few changes in that the LEC works in some different parameters. So the first one is that there's a very positive sentiment around the LEC league, and that results in a lot of pride and a lot of passion from players, from staff, from the orgs themselves. The LEC is viewed under a very negative. Sorry, the LCS is viewed under a very negative lens, especially from the fans, where there are lots of people hating on the gameplay coming out from North America, from the kind of just around the league as a whole. And so that's one major difference. I think that changes how we see a lot of things. Um, I think the only other really major change that I see is that I think the players have a lot more control and say over what happens in the LEC. Whereas looking more towards the LCS, the orgs tend to have a much heavier hand, especially when it comes to roster building and decision making.
Okay, cool. No, definitely. I mean, I can understand what you're saying where, you have the LEC and the LCS and it's looked at it like that. It makes sense. It's upsetting because it's not fair really for the players or the orgs or the management staff. But I do understand it. I suppose another big question is for me. I mean, I'm a chef by trade, so for me, food is kind of like the whole my life. Food is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys put a lot of nutrition, kind of focus on nutrition for players, along with also fitness, physical, physiological, mental preparation, really, for going into it, especially if you're focusing on players who are, as you said, kind of younger players, building up, improving them. Surely you guys, well, you obviously do have a focus on that and like the steps being taken to go into it.
Yeah, so this is something we're definitely leveling up this year as well. So I can say that in previous years, we've had special nutrition plans built by nutritionists. We've hired custom personal chefs to make that happen and make that a reality for all of our players. I can say that next year it's an even bigger focus for us, and I can't talk too much about it myself because this is a lot of work that's being put in place right now, kind of as we speak, by Lenny Wisma, who's coming out as our director of performance to oversee all of the kind of out of game aspects, as well as a lot of the mental and preparation aspects in game as well, for our team. So very excited to see what we can do this year. But I feel I can't give you too much detail right now.
No, that's good. It's good to hear that. It's definitely good to see because I've seen it a lot. I see when I watch kind of like the videos, the team videos, like Team Liquid. They do that whole series thing, and it's good to see that they have chefs and people there cooking quality food for the players. Because like I know when it was before, it obviously wasn't the sport and the scene that it is now. Esports when it started, so it is really cool to see the teams are taking it seriously and they are in a sense helping the players to make sure that they are getting their nutritional values that they need because it is important. I mean, it's the same as any other sport. Just because you're sitting down doesn't mean that it's not taxing on the mind and the body. So it's important to be getting those things in. So it's good to hear that. It's really good to hear that. Um, Going back again to kind of the lower divisions, and I suppose I can ask you because you were a past pro player and how do you see challenges for newer players, the bigger challenges that players where they want to compete, even if it is just Division 3, Division 2, what's the biggest challenge from them getting from that division to the higher divisions and then into scouting for the LCS, for example? What would the biggest challenge be, do you think, personally, for those players?
So it's very hard to say because every scenario is different. There are players that might come from that background that might build really strong relationships that then have their other teammates get scouted or move on, or their coaching staff, and then be able to have that connection with them to get in, to get a recommendation, to get into the next league. So this stuff really varies a lot depending on exactly your situation. So the general advice that I always give is understand first what I call the natural progression of your player. You start in solo queue. You first start in a minor league, like a Division 2 or something of a minor league, right? You next move on to Division 1. You next move on to that minor league for real. You next move into perhaps the official academy system, right? And then finally you make it onto the LCS team. Now that progression that you go through is what's called a natural progression. The first thing you understand is if you follow that system, what is the thing that you need to do to break into the next one? And very often you can hit up the coaches and the players and the staff involved in the league above you, and you can ask them that. You can ask them, what's the biggest thing that's differentiating players in this league to that league, right? And together with the resources you have available to you, you can work on your own plan to fix those issues, to make yourself stronger, and to get there. So once you do that, the next thing becomes, once you have a good handle of how you want to move to the next step, try everything you can to break that cycle. So let's say that right now you're in, let's say an amateur team, and you say, I want to be an LCS team. How do I break the cycle? How do I make that leap? What do I do to differentiate myself from every other player out there, just like me, who's showing promise and is in these leagues? And once you have the understanding of how everyone else is going to do it and how you should do it, it makes it much easier to come up with creative ways to really work around that or to take two steps at the same time. So that's my general advice.
I know. I wish I had that advice when I was playing. I mean, I wasn't really a big League of Legends player at the time. I'm kind of a big Dota League of Legends head now. I was more CS:GO at the time, but if I was able to look at it like that when I was playing, could have been maybe a bit different. I still think to this day I was never good enough to go pro. I kind of admitted that to myself early on, so
It's probably best if you
yeah.
feel that way,
Exactly. No, I was able to admit it myself. I mean, I played on some smaller teams, but then I realized, maybe I'm just not good enough for this. But no, it's definitely good for younger guys to be looking at it like that. I mean, there's so many guys now that are just so good. But it's, again, the way that I look at it is it's the same as every other sport, professional sport. If it was that easy to do it, everyone would do it. And there is only that 1% that make it for a reason because they have something that other people don't have. Like you said, they are able to look at it in a different way and make their own leap and make their own changes to break the cycle, like you said. So it's definitely a proper way to look at it. then I suppose my last question would be in relation to the organizations, orgs that are on a lower ecosystem than those tier one teams. I mean, like yourselves, is there any way that they can replicate any aspect of an organization at that top level, being in a lower ecosystem? Because it is hard, and I do see it, that it is harder for those teams in the NLC, even in the Division 2 Prime League. I mean, there is people making a big leap at it, but is there any advice you can maybe give those lower ecosystem teams that they could replicate something like you guys are doing over at Dignitas?
So, I mean, I'll give you a great example. And I won't be specific, but let's take a game like CS:GO, and a team like X Luminosity into SK Gaming into MIBR. If you follow that team's journey, you see they come from a very weak region, traditionally and at the time. And they are a group of players that had a dream that they know they can be better. They not only wanted to be, but they knew they could be. And so they sat together and they grinded. And they said, how do we get to the next level? And it starts out with doing something different that no one else was doing. So, perhaps in some cases it might be, oh, what if we watch remote replays? In some cases it might be, what if we all have a proper sleep schedule? What if we practice harder than the other guys? What if we practice in a different way than the other teams? And by pushing that advantage and pushing harder and smarter than the other teams around you, they created a scenario where they started quickly improving. They used that to then fly to America, and to play in the American region when no other Brazilian team was, and they became the best team in North America. They used that status as being the best in North America, to keep pushing harder and then to become the best in the world, and was at the time honestly quite dominant.
Yeah.
That story is replicatable, and it has been replicated so many times, in many esports across much of the past 10 or 15 years. And so it can be done again. If you are in that minor region, there's going to be things that that you could do to improve that you're not doing. A classic example is that that if you get 7.5 hours sleep every night, you go to bed at the same time every night, you will feel better and you will be able to learn faster. And yet I promise you, the majority of players are not doing that.
No.
And it's just the truth that you have to confront, eventually, where you say, why am I not doing that? The answer is that you don't want it enough. There's other things in your life that you want more, and the players that will rise above will be the ones that are willing to take those extra steps. So yes, that's my advice: is do something extra.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, like you said, it is replicatable, like it was with those guys, the Brazilian guys. Um, when they won, I mean, when they beat all those teams, when they were playing as Luminosity and SK, I mean, they were such a dominant team for such a long period of time. And even now, recently, at the most recent Dota 2 International, Team Spirit, having lost nearly, well, not, I won't say nearly, but having lost a lot of their stage games in DPC, and then going on to win one of the biggest tournaments in the world, they could now all retire, never play anything again, never have to worry about anything again, and they're now still back playing DPC. They've won their first game just recently. I mean, that's a savage story as well. I mean, those guys don't have to worry about anything for the rest of their lives. But it's definitely, like you said, replicatable. So it is a good way to look at it also. No, I mean, that's definitely from my end a really nice insight. I mean, on your background at the start, definitely, and then also on Dignitas, what you guys are doing for the new season. And I feel like it'll help a lot of players as well. Some of the stuff that we touched on, younger guys, what they can do to enable themselves to get to that next level. So it's it's been an honor. It's been very, very nice to speak with you. And thank you for your time, and thanks for all the information and the insight that you're after giving to us. And I wish you guys the very best of luck in the upcoming season. I can only imagine that you guys will do extremely. I can only imagine you guys will do extremely well, especially with everything that I've heard, the staff that you guys have, and I'm excited to see the nutritional stuff come. I'll be definitely watching out for that.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. And yeah, let's do this again.
No worries, definitely. Thanks very much, James. All right, much appreciated.